All right, we are jumping back into the book of Mark this morning. We took a short break from the book of Mark for our gratitude series, which took us all through the season of Lent through Easter. And we preached every single week on something about gratitude, on how we're supposed to be a grateful people. But now the gratitude series is over, which means none of us have to practice gratitude anymore. We're done. We've mission accomplished all of that. So now it's back to complaining, grumbling, whining, all of those things. We have finished up and done all the gratitude for 2026 that we are going to do. When we finished up the book of Mark, for our series, we ended right after the end of chapter 4, which means now we're jumping back into chapter 5. And if you forgot what happened as we ended chapter 4, Jesus, after doing ministry, got into a boat, was crossing the Sea of Galilee. A huge storm swelled up, and Jesus had to calm the wind and the waves. That was where we ended. Jesus showed his power and his authority over nature. Now we move into chapter 5, and Jesus goes into healing a demon-possessed man. So not only is Jesus demonstrating power over the natural, he's demonstrating his power over the supernatural. How many of you recognize and know that there's more that's happening in our world than just what we see in the physical? There is a very real spiritual realm out there. There's good and evil. Angels are real. Demons are real. The devil is real. We talk a lot about the kingdom of God and how much hope there is in that, but there is also a kingdom of Satan, and he is doing what he can to build his empire. In the book, The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, he writes, there are two equal and opposite errors into which our race can fall about the devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence. The other is to believe and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. They themselves are equally pleased by both errors and hail a materialist or a magician with the same delight. Lewis's advice is sound for us because you and I do not want to be people who ignore the dark and evil forces that are at work, but we also don't want to be people who obsess over them either. As believers in Jesus, we recognize the reality of the devil, the reality of the demonic, but we don't over-spiritualize everything, and we don't under-spiritualize everything. Some of us like to over-spiritualize because it's always Satan's that's doing something. It's never us. So we never have to take accountability for our actions or our choices because it's the devil's fault. Others of us are just completely clueless and unaware that the devil's real and that he's out there and that there are things that he is doing and operating in our lives that are really because of his actions and not because of our actions or somebody else's actions. For instance, it might be really difficult for you to wake up in the morning, get out of bed, and get to church and to serve. You feel so unmotivated. You feel so lethargic. You feel like you have no energy, and it feels like such a fight to get here, and it feels like it takes everything in your willpower to show up. And that might be Satan coming against you, trying to attack you and keep you from God's good things for you. And you have to fight against that and push against that. And some of you, you're feeling those things because of how you order your schedule and your time and your week. And you stayed up so late last night. So sometimes it's what's going on because of our choices, and other times it's because of what the devil's doing. Which one is it? We want to be people that are discerning, and we're not under-spiritualizing everything, but we're not over-spiritualizing either. In our passage this morning, we are being given a glimpse into the fact that the dark side of the supernatural is real. But we also realize that there's no need for us to worry, fear, or get distracted because Jesus demonstrates complete dominion over this realm. Jesus came, part of his mission is to overthrow and usurp the rule of Satan. He showed us, listen, I've got complete power, and Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. So all through his ministry, whether he's in the Jewish areas or he's in the Gentile areas, Jesus shows consistently that he has power over all of these demons. He has dominion over the rule and reign of Satan in all places. He's able to break down spiritual strongholds and forces and set us free from evil, whether that's in Israel, whether that's beyond Israel. There is no place that darkness can outthwart or outpower the light of God. We know that the rule and reign of God is being established everywhere, and one day there is going to be a time when there is no place on earth where Satan has any more influence or control, and we long for that day, don't we? As we encounter this story, yes, Jesus is casting out demons, but there's more going on here than just a demon being kicked out. There's a very comprehensive, all-inclusive power that Jesus is demonstrating in this story. And I want us to pay attention to just how impressive and holistic Jesus' power really is. So I'm going to highlight a variety of ways his power and authority are on display while he is casting out the demons. How his actions affect life in the natural while he is establishing his dominion and dominance in the supernatural. Jesus' actions impacted the people, their lived reality on multiple fronts while he was dealing with the demonic forces at work in this individual. So first, we need to pay attention right away that Jesus demonstrated power over long-term suffering. Jesus demonstrated power over long-term suffering. The passage opens up with Jesus getting out of the boat in this region, and this man with the impure spirit comes to him from the tombs and meets him. And this man from the tombs, the text says, no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart, broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, day and night, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. The text is not just telling us that this man has been demon-possessed, it's telling us that this man has been demon-possessed for a very long time. Jesus is not encountering somebody who was just freshly possessed by demons. This was a man who was part of this community, and this community didn't know what to do with this individual anymore. They had tried everything. Nothing worked. And they were at their wits' end because nobody could do anything, so they had resigned themselves to this man just going amongst the tombs, living by himself, giving him over to his torment because they couldn't do anything about it, and they were just accepting the status quo. This had been going on for so long that everyone had just acclimated to the new normal. His condition was so long-term that the community had given up on him. They tried everything. They were out of ideas. In everybody's mind, there was nothing more that could be done. So they're all accepting the new status quo, and they're moving on with their life. Now, when I think of Jesus demonstrating power over long-term suffering, one of the first stories that comes to my mind is Jesus healing the woman with the issue of blood. Anyone else sort of like have that like sort of jog your memory? Like that woman had been suffering for over 12 years, and the text says that no doctor could do anything about it. And again, another story where this person was just resigned to their fate, and nobody could do anything about it, so we just got to move on with life. Did you know that that is going to be the story we talk about next? Because that's the next story that Mark puts in the passage. Back to back, Jesus is healing people suffering with long-term suffering. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. I think Mark is showing us that with Jesus, hope is never lost. With God, there is nothing that is ever too late or too far gone. Which means the length of time that you and I have been suffering, the level of deterioration that our bodies have suffered into, none of these things are a determiner as to God's ability to show up with power. No matter how long we have been in the status quo, no matter how many people have given up and said there's nothing that can be done, that doesn't mean God can't operate and God can't act. God has the ability to heal, set free, and change the trajectory of our lives. Does anyone in this room that believe that with God all things are possible? The question is where are we resigning ourselves to the status quo? Believing that this is all there is and this is how it has to be. This situation in my life, what I'm dealing with and what I'm going through has been going on for so long that I've now come to accept and believe that this is the final verdict for my life. And now I've got to deal with this, live with it, and suffer with it until the end of my days. Maybe you're here this morning and you're dealing with long-term sickness or pain, and every doctor that you've gone to says, we don't have an answer for you. Maybe you're here this morning and your marriage has fallen apart to the point where everyone, your family, your friends, even counseling experts, therapists are saying there's probably no hope for that relationship anymore. Maybe you know the pain of a child who's walked away from you or from God, and you have no idea how to help them or support them anymore because maybe it's been years or decades. Maybe you've surmounted a financial debt through bad choices where you are so deep and the interest payments are growing so fast on a daily basis, you see no light at the end of that tunnel. I think many of us are able to look around at all of the societal ills that plague us. Violence, addiction, homelessness, poverty, war, and we say, how are these things ever going to change? These things have been with us forever. There's no answers to them. Maybe you're here this morning and you have been so long gone, set in your ways, doing things your own way, and you think there's no hope for yourself. We're talking years of struggle, decades of the status quo. Well, I'm here to tell you that our passage shows us that Jesus says long term doesn't mean long gone. Long term doesn't mean long gone. At any moment, Jesus is able to show up on a boat, step off of that boat, step into our lives, into our existence, into our pain, into our isolation, into our suffering, into a space and a place where we are just filled with daily torment. And he is able to set us free. He is able to heal us. He is able to do the miraculous in us. This reminds me of Israel. Israel was in bondage for hundreds of years, under slavery to Pharaoh. I'm sure that after 400 years, or however many years it was, the people weren't believing there was any more hope for them. This is it. This is our life. We're going to just live like this. And all of a sudden, a burning bush happens, and everything changes. Jesus can still do that today. Secondly, Jesus demonstrated power over insurmountable odds. Well, seemingly insurmountable odds, obviously. But verse 6 says, when the demon-possessed man saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. This story disturbs me a little bit because I don't know if you know, but I live in a part of Chicago where right around the corner there's a park called Legion Park. And I can't go there. I just fear that there's many demons in this park that maybe after they were cast out and ended up in the pigs, they somehow swam the Mediterranean. And now this is their new domain, and they are many. Actually, this is a real park that's right around the corner from my house, but legion here refers to a Roman military term, and a Roman legion is a unit of military that was the largest in the Roman army. So when a legion was gathered, the legion would be between 4,000 to 5,000 people in a legion. And this demon says, we are legion, for we are many. Does that mean 4,000 to 5,000 demons were afflicting this one individual? I can't say for sure, but when Jesus does cast out the demons, he sends them into a herd of pigs, numbering 2,000 around, and all those pigs end up going off the cliff. So it seems safe to assume a minimum of 2,000 demons afflicting this individual. I mean, that's insane, isn't it? One man, Jesus, against thousands of demons. Alan Cole says, we don't know the exact numbers, but what we do know is that Jesus was outnumbered. It was one man against an army of evil. Those are his words. One man against an army of evil. Of course, this is the appropriate time for us to talk about Helm's Deep from Lord of the Rings, because in the battle for Helm's Deep, you've got this orc army that is massive, and you've got the human army, the men of Rohan. It is small. They're in the fortress, but I digress because I talk about Lord of the Rings way too much in this church. So I'm going to give you a real-life example from the Battle of Narva in 1700. The Russian Tsar Peter the Great, he wanted to take St. Petersburg, and it was under Swedish control at the time. He was desperate to gain access to the seaports of the Baltic Sea, so his first stop was to surround Narva, this fortress, this Swedish fortress, because it was the gateway to the Gulf of Finland, and this is located in modern-day Estonia, and he brought 35,000 troops with him to Narva, and he encircled the city, and he started shooting cannonballs into the city, and he just waited, believing they were either going to die from the cannonballs, die from starvation. They just needed to wait them out, and this fortress would be his. Swedish Emperor Charles XII, shortly thereafter, after hearing that Peter the Great had arrived, comes with only 8,000 men, and he's outnumbered 4 to 1. But despite being outnumbered, some would say foolishly, others would say courageously, he attacked the Russian forces. And coincidentally, at the time that the battle began, a massive blizzard swirled up, and it became so bad that the fighting had to stop because neither forces could maneuver anymore. The storm was so strong. So while both are in their holding pattern, the blizzard is raging and the winds begin to shift, so that now the winds are blowing straight into the faces of the Russian forces, into the army. It is so strong and they're so blinded they can't even see. Charles recognizes the advantage that he has, and he takes his 8,000 forces, and he moves up to the Russian army without them being able to hear, see, or detect them. And before the Russians even realized what was happening, they were falling under the Swedish swords to where all 35,000 were either killed, captured, or defeated by the 8,000-person army. And while this is a real-life story, the Bible is filled with all sorts of these stories. And they're always attributed to the power of God showing up when there were insurmountable odds. Think of Gideon taking 300 men against an army of thousands. Think of Samson with one jawbone killing many Philistines. You've got Jonathan and his armor bearer. I don't know if you know the story or not. They were being ridiculed and taunted by a whole outpost of Philistine soldiers. The two of them climb a cliff together, get to the top of the cliff, and just defeat the entire outpost. This is what the Bible shows us. God empowering people, individuals, one against many. And here Jesus is demonstrating that there is nothing that thousands of demons can do against his power. His authority and his dominion is so much greater. This is the God you and I serve. This is the one who is on our side. So the question is when you and I feel surrounded, when you and I feel outnumbered, when you feel like the entire world is against us, is there still hope? You know, I thought that I imagined in my mind when I was putting the sermon together that everybody would be hooping and hollering through this entire sermon. We'd all be shouting because, man, like God's got power against long-term suffering. God's got power against when we're outnumbered. Do we really believe these things? So you might be in your workplace and you might feel like I'm the only one that is serving or trying to follow Jesus here. There is nobody with me. You might be in your school, whether it's a middle school, high school, or college, and you might feel like I am the only one alone in the midst of all of this darkness that's around me. In my family, no one is serving Jesus. I'm the only one serving Jesus. It doesn't matter how outnumbered we feel, God's power is greater. Maybe you're feeling like society and culture is just getting worse and worse and worse. More pagan, more secular, whatever you want to name it. And it feels like Jesus followers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Maybe you feel like you're just under spiritual attack consistently and constantly. It's one attack right after another. It's multiple attacks happening simultaneously. It doesn't matter what it is. Jesus, who defeated Legion, can show up in power in our situations. The story of Easter. Jesus overcame something that we all thought was hopeless, death, and he came out of that grave. And if the power of death can't stop Jesus, that means when you and I are feeling outnumbered, out-resourced, out-everything, out-powered, no advantages, we're at a disadvantage, man, this story is not over. When it feels like life is at its darkest, the light of God can come bursting through at any moment. Man, there is such hope for you and I in this story. Jesus has shown, as he's casting out this demon, that he has power over long-term suffering. He's shown that he's got power against insurmountable odds. And then the next thing he does is he shows that he has power to affect regional economics. And we don't really talk about stuff like this in church much. But what happens next affected the economy. A large herd of pigs feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them. So he gives them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside, and all the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. And in verse 17 it says, then everybody asked Jesus to leave the region. Now, this is a very unusual part of a story that is already very unusual, okay? I get it. I want to admit it. You know, dealing with the demonic and, like, spiritual forces, it can be uncomfortable to talk about or deal with. But now we're dealing with something very unusual with Jesus sending demons into pigs and the demons running off of the cliff. Like, what is happening here? Why did it have to happen this way? I was reading a bedtime story with Jolene the other day, and, like, man, sometimes things in the Bible just make it sound like that could never happen in real life. For instance, we were reading about Samson, and a lot of Samson's story is pretty unbelievable anyway, this man with such incredible strength. But as we were reading the story, the part that stuck out to me is the fact that Samson was able to capture foxes and tie torches to their tails. And I'm like, that's got to be really difficult to do, and did that really happen? And how did he actually trap foxes and actually get the things tied onto the tails without the foxes bite? Something as simple as small as that can spin me into a spiral to be like, man, is this even true? And I feel that way about the pigs here. Like, why this? Well, maybe it's because Jews are kosher. And Jesus is like, we got to get rid of these pigs. Like, they're unclean. Or maybe there was like an outbreak of swine flu about to happen, and Jesus just knew it and said, let's stop the pandemic before it even starts. I read a few popular reasons from some New Testament scholars, and some of the things that I read were about, one said that it was important for there to be a visual for the people to see just how many demons were plaguing this man. So by the 2,000 herd going into the sea, you could at least see visually the intensity of the demonic possession. Another individual said Jesus was cleansing and purifying both people and place. One said the owners of the pigs might have been Jewish and they were being punished by Jesus. I thought that was interesting. But the one that sort of stuck with me most, and I don't know how true it is, but the thing was is when I started studying this story, the long-term suffering thing really brought me back to Israel and how Israel was in slavery for hundreds of years under the Egyptian rule. And this New Testament scholar said that what was happening here is that Jesus is showing that he is operating with the same deliverance power that God brought the Israelites out from Egypt with, and the pigs rushing into the water was a symbolism of Pharaoh and his army being swallowed up by the Red Sea. Now, I don't know if that's accurate or true, but I thought that's a very interesting claim to make. And while it's hard to pinpoint and understand the symbolism that's happening here, and we don't have any easy answers around the pigs and everything that was going on, I think what clear-cut stood out to me was that by the pigs being sent into the water, 2,000 pigs, it affected the economy of the region. We know that for a fact. 2,000 pigs being killed was no joke. This wasn't probably one person's herd. This was probably many people's herd, all grazing together, and it was all being shepherded by a few workers. And the instantaneous loss of 2,000 pigs in an instant, it represented a regional-wide loss of income, regional-wide loss of food, and a regional-wide loss of resources. And when the man was set free, and the entire townspeople came to see what was going on, and they saw the demon-possessed man in his right mind clothed, and then they heard about the pigs all going over the edge of the cliff, something disturbing was exposed within their hearts. And that was this: they were more concerned about what they were losing than what they were gaining. Because what they were losing was money, resources, and profits, and what they were gaining was the restoration of an individual back into their community. The loss of money and profit disturbed them and mattered more to them than the re-inclusion of someone who had been lost to them. Bill Clinton said, "It's the economy, stupid." I don't know if anyone of you are old enough to remember that. This idea that you can win presidential elections and people will follow you if you keep the economy humming for them. And here we are, very similar to these individuals, because we're not better than them. We say, God, we want you to disrupt suffering. God, we want you to heal people. We want you to mend what it is broken. Just don't let it affect my pocketbook. Just don't let it affect my life. Just don't make me sacrifice and give up something so that somebody else can be healed, restored, or delivered. You see, when Jesus deals with powers and principalities that are in the supernatural, it almost always has a reverberating impact on the natural. Why? Because so many of our systems and structures today in this world are under the control and the dominion of Satan. Satan is using our systems, human systems, to spread forth his kingdom of darkness, whether it is injustice, inequality, unfairness, you name it. It's not just stuff happening in the natural, it's stuff that's happening in the supernatural. So, with these systems, structures, and powers that are influenced and even controlled by evil and the reign of Satan, as God comes and confronts these powers and challenges them, it will end up impacting how the economic wheels of society turn. It's going to change them. Who profits? Who holds power? How institutions function. They are not in isolation from each other. What happens in the supernatural affects the natural. And then what happens in the natural affects the supernatural. So when you and I pray to God and say, God, there is so much darkness and evil in this world. There is so much brokenness in this world. There are so many dark forces at work in this world. Lord, cast these things out and set people free. The next thing you and I need to be prepared for is for things to shift in a way that might affect us. Our power, our privilege, and the status quo that some of us are benefiting from without even realizing that we're benefiting from it. Broken systems, evil systems that are helping us live into our convenient lives. We're no better than the community here. We so easily will dismiss how God is moving among marginalized, vulnerable people and get frustrated with it and get upset with it because it's making us uncomfortable. It's making our life harder. It's making us sacrifice more. And then the final thing that happens in our story, Jesus demonstrates a power that affected destinies. So Jesus is showing power over long-term suffering. He's showing power over insurmountable odds. He's showing power that affects regional economics. And now he's able to affect destinies. The people were pleading with Jesus to leave their region. So Jesus goes into the boat, and the man who had been demon-possessed says, I want to go with you. And Jesus says, no. Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. So as the story concludes, Jesus is giving in to the wishes of the townspeople. They're saying, Jesus, get out of here. He goes, okay. The formerly demon-possessed man says, Jesus, I want to go with you. And Jesus says, no. And this is happening simultaneously. He's agreeing to the terms of one group of people. He's not agreeing to the terms of this other individual. Jesus is demonstrating power to determine outcomes in a way that affects people's destiny. Can you imagine, because the people said, no, Jesus, we don't want you here. We're so upset by what you've done. And Jesus says, okay, this region missed out on Jesus doing ministry there. I don't know how long Jesus was intending to spend time in this Gentile region, but they missed out on something. They missed out on something really important, all because they told Jesus to go. I had to read this quote twice whenever I read it, because it's really powerful. Alan Cole says, there are times when the worst possible thing for us is that the Lord should grant our prayer. There are times when the worst possible thing for us is that the Lord should grant our prayer. That is what this town region was doing, giving Jesus a request. And he goes, okay, that's what you want. I'll see you later. Jesus' mission was to bring good news to both Jew and Gentile. But here the Gentile community is pushing back against him, saying, hey, get out of here. And you know what Jesus says? He goes, I'm not going to force myself on you. I'm not going to coerce you. I'm not going to I'm not a God of compulsion. What I'm looking for is open hearts, open minds. I'm looking for people that want to welcome me in. Ironically, some of us are resisting God and saying no to God, no to his rule, no to his reign, because we want control. We want to make our choices. We want to be king. We want to be Lord of our own lives. And then we get upset when Jesus doesn't show up when we're in trouble. But we've already said goodbye to him. We've already said, Jesus, we don't want you here. I want to do things my way. On the other hand, you've got the man who was healed begging to go with Jesus. And I'm like, this is a really great wish. This man wants to become a disciple. Like, what is wrong with saying, Jesus, I want to follow you? Isn't that what we do as followers of Jesus? Jesus, let me become a disciple. But Jesus wasn't letting him become the disciple in the way that he wanted to be a disciple. He was doing it in a different way. And this man could have reacted very poorly because, Jesus, I just want to follow you. And Jesus says, no, I want you to go back to these people and I want you to tell them all that I've done for you. They're not going to let me in, but I want you to go back. Jesus, in his love and in his mercy, even though the people were rejecting him and saying, Jesus, get out of here, he's like, I still want the gospel to be preached to you. That's who Jesus is. So I'm going to put an emissary in my place. I'm going to send this man back to share the good news with you that you don't want me to bring to you. Now, for the man, I would imagine that life would have been better and easier for him to go with Jesus, because these individuals are the ones who had banished him to the tombs. These are the individuals that wanted nothing to do with him anymore. These are the individuals that all of a sudden the pigs get thrown into the sea and they care more about the pigs than they do him. And Jesus says, instead of coming with me, go back to them. I'm like, no, Jesus, I'm coming with you. Like, I'm getting rid of this, like getting out of here. The thing is some of us are justifying our rebellion against God because we can look at Scripture and say, these are good things for me to be pursuing. But ultimately, if Jesus is Lord and King of our life, it's not about if we can justify it to be sinful or not sinful. The question is, what is Jesus asking of you? And if you're going to walk away from what Jesus is asking of you to do specifically and choose to do something else that's good, that's still rebellion. That man could have jumped into the boat and began to follow Jesus along with the other 12 disciples and heralded himself as a 13th disciple and patted himself on the back because look at what I'm doing, I'm following Jesus. And he would have been living in outright rebellion against God because Jesus had asked him to do something else. And is it possible that Jesus has been pulling on your heart, working in your life, asking you to do something, to be something, like whatever it is, and you've been rejecting that and justifying your rebellion because you're still doing really good things? When we resist Jesus, he won't force himself on us. When we pursue Jesus, he will provide direction for us. He might not direct us to what we want to do, but he will end up showing us what he wants us to do. And I'm really impressed by this man who was able to go back to those individuals, to be in that place that he didn't want to be anymore, and to say yes to Jesus. As we close this morning, the story, it's doing more than just demonstrating Jesus having authority over the demonic. It's showing that Jesus has power over long-term suffering, that Jesus has power over enemies that outnumber us, that Jesus has power over both the natural and the supernatural, over economics, and he controls destinies. As we prepare to close this morning, and we're going to close our time this morning in prayer, because when we're dealing with powers and principalities of the supernatural, we don't combat those things with flesh and blood. We fight those things through prayer. But there's one aspect of this story that I wanted to highlight because I think that what happens here in this story so often plagues so many people who are trying to follow Jesus. And that is the fact that the demons, as soon as Jesus stepped onto the shore out of the boat, the demons knew exactly who he was. Those demonic powers had very intense clarity around who Jesus was, while the disciples who were traveling with him for years still were fuzzy about who Jesus was. There's a contrast between what we as humans see in the natural versus what the demonic sees. And everywhere that Jesus encountered the demonic, they knew instantly that he was the Son of God, whereas everyone else was a little bit wondering, who is this man? And how this applies to our lives today is that when you and I've seen this so many times, individuals who make an authentic, honest, goodwill commitment of faith to Jesus because life has been going horribly, they've realized that they shouldn't be doing this, like living in the way that they're living anymore, they've come to the end of themselves in some way, and they realize, I need to give God a chance. So what do? They bow the knee, they make a commitment, and they say, Jesus, I want you to be Lord of my life because I need my life to get better. And the instant that they make a commitment to Jesus, life gets worse. Like, this is a reality. I've seen it happen over and over again because as soon as an individual decides to get real with Jesus and they invite resurrection power into themselves to allow themselves to become a conduit for God's power now in this world, Satan becomes afraid. He gets nervous because your life used to be ineffective. You used to be a no-brainer. He was in control. But now, if Jesus is in control, Satan's like, I got to do everything I can to thwart this, to stop this. I got to put an end to this. Because now this person has the ability to be a vessel for God's power, so he attacks. And he makes life hard. And he makes life more difficult. And we as people are of faith are going like, I didn't sign up for this. Life was supposed to be better. And we as pastors and preachers are to blame for some of this because we make promises that the Bible really never gives, because we just really want people to sign up and follow Jesus. But nothing in Scripture says that Jesus came to make our lives easier. What Jesus says is, I will fill you with my power. The power that cast out legion. And you can live with that power and operate with that power against the darkness and against the difficulties of life. That's very different. So we can't quit. We can't stop. We can't get disenfranchised. And maybe you're here this morning and you've been wanting to quit. You've been wanting to give up. Today's the day to recommit. Today's the day to buckle down and remember that, this is just part of the plan. Satan is doing everything in his power to disrupt me, to derail me, and to throw me off track. Expect the hardship. Expect the attacks. Expect the devil to throw everything at you to make you want to quit. You are making him nervous, but guess what? You are on the winning side. Jesus is more powerful than any power of Satan. He has the power over all human suffering, even the kind of suffering that plagues us for years. He has the power to defeat enemies that rise up against us, no matter how many there are. He controls all things in the natural and in the supernatural. He's able to control destinies, allowing things to happen, allowing things not to happen. This is the God that we serve. We are on the winning side when we follow Jesus. There's always hope. There's always a chance. And if the one who demonstrated this power over legion is the one who loves us, cares for us, and protects us, and empowers us, man, we have it good. So, where do you need God's power today? Are you ready to quit? If you are, we want to pray with you and pray over you. We're going to be inviting our leadership team, our pastoral team, our care team to make their way to the front because we are going to spend a little extended time in prayer. If you want prayer because you are feeling weak, you are feeling tired, you're feeling disenfranchised, come and receive prayer. Maybe you're here this morning and you're struggling in long-term, ongoing suffering. Whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, you have been in a state and in a place for a really long time, and you basically have resigned yourself to that state. We want to pray over you, and we want to see you filled with hope that God can intervene at any single time. Are you facing what seems like insurmountable odds? And you don't know how you're going to defeat the enemy around you. You don't know how you're going to overcome the powers that be. Guess what? Jesus can overcome them for you. And we want to pray over you if you're facing insurmountable odds. Are you desperate for him to disrupt the social systems and structures of oppression in our world? I think many of us are in that place. But we can't just protest. We have to pray. I'm not saying that we don't protest, but how many of us are fighting in our own strength and in our own powers against things that are not just the natural, these are things that are of the supernatural. So if you are fighting hard in the fight for justice, in the fight for equality, in the fight for fairness, in the fight to end wars, in the fight to, you name it, all those things, how much are you praying about those things? We want to pray with you this morning. And are you looking for direction? Are you looking for God to give you a better sense of what your destiny is? We want to pray with you because this entire passage shows that God does all these things. He shows up in our suffering. He shows up when the odds are stacked against us. He shows up and disrupts societal systems, and he shows up and determines destinies. Don't let the enemy paralyze you, prevent you, or keep you from seeking the Lord this morning. Resist the enemy, and he will flee. I'm going to invite Jim and Slava to lead us in this song, Lord, I Need You. And if you know that you need him this morning, and you would love to receive prayer from this loving community, would you please come, and our leaders will pray with you and pray for you. If you want to kneel at your seat, feel free to do that. If you want to invite someone to pray over you where you're at, let's take some moment, let's take the next 10 minutes, and let's fight back against the powers of Satan. Amen?